Welcome to RHI's Sociable City Interviews, where we meet with global thought leaders on nightlife and the social economy. Today we are here with Jocelyn Kane, Senior Policy Advisor, Responsible Hospitality Institute, and former Executive Director, San Francisco Entertainment Commission. Hey, Jocelyn, how you doing?
Great. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing great. Everybody's looking forward, hopefully, to the future.
Right. Absolutely.
And I'm sure you feel the same way. I appreciate you taking the time. I know this is kind of a combination of your work with RHI, but more importantly, I think it's your experiences before coming to be involved with us, particularly with the Entertainment Commission, and then more recently, I know you're working on a lot of the cannabis regulations. In fact, you're working for a city's system. So be interesting to hear a little bit about what you think about cannabis. But just why don't we just give a little bit of background and history? I think people always want to know, how do you get to be what you are, and how did you come to be where you are?
Thank you for having me. Yeah. So my background is pretty much in city government. I got out of college and somewhat aimless. I went back to school and got myself a public policy degree, which is a door opener for city governments because they love that. So I worked for the city and county of San Francisco for 25 years about. And then from 2003 to 2017, I worked for something called the Entertainment Commission, which was a brand new city agency that was formed out of stress and problems from the growth of housing without taking into the conversation the fact that nightlife was in certain parts of the city, and those two things don't always work well together. Those conflicts happen, and so born out of those conflicts was this entity experiment called the Entertainment Commission, which
Okay.
was a really interesting ride. Certainly, to create a new department in any city is interesting in and of itself, and to pull away the power from the police department, which in many cities is typically where entertainment gets permitted or licensed. So Entertainment Commission is primarily a regulatory and compliance agency for the city and county. And then over time, we were able to create an economic development position in the mayor's office to work in concert with that entity that did regulatory and compliance. And I know we're going to maybe get to that.
Yeah, we'll get into more depth about that. But
Yeah.
on a personal level, you were an event planner, right? You were an event organizer, or you were involved in music, or what is your side
My
interest
my
beyond
side
just being
hustle.
your bureaucratic government work?
Right. So my side hustle was for a very long time music in some capacity, but music business. And I learned by doing how to become basically a booking agent. I booked a small club with live bands for 2 years, every single Friday and Saturday. And then I worked on festivals. And so we booked bands for 3-day festivals on an annual basis. And I was really into the live music scene in San Francisco. And that was in the 90s. I was sort of finding myself and learning about San Francisco through that live music scene, which was super healthy and fun and diverse and interesting. And at the same time, there was like a house music, kind of dance music kind of movement happening as well in the city. So the nightlife there was really, really abundant and healthy. And I took part in as much as I could. And was more of a promoter than I was an owner. So I worked with a lot of the live venues, but as just a promoter who'd come in and hopefully make them some money and make me some money. But in the end, it's a really tough business to make money in. So it definitely stayed a side hustle. And watching, and I had done that after I had had some city experience, and I left the city full time. I stayed on part time in the work I was doing, but it wasn't related to nightlife at all. It was related to parking and traffic. So I had my fill of talking to people about parking tickets at parties. So I was very, very part-time and found some other things to keep me busy, and then watched as this entertainment commission got created through a referendum, through a vote of the people of San Francisco.
Quite an interesting background that you bring to that job. Not only just your passion and involvement with nightlife and the venues and the music in particular, but also transportation and parking, which clearly is related to conflicts that emerge or challenges that emerge. And I would suspect with fewer people willing to take mass transit and people using more private vehicles, and many of the streets being taken over by outdoor dining, you're going to start to see a lot of public safety and public traffic management issues, kind of emerging. But let's just get back to the Entertainment Commission. Just briefly, for those who don't understand how it's structured, explain how it's structured, and what do you think the major impacts the commission had during the time that you were there, in terms of managing people's desire for places to socialize, but also, like you said, the conflicts that might emerge with people who want to live in those same areas.
Right. So the Entertainment Commission, like I said, was an experiment. It was someone's master idea to create a body that would determine who got entertainment permits and who didn't. And the one thing in San Francisco, right, that was already there was a structure of permitting places of entertainment under a certain definition of what's considered a place of entertainment. So what they did was create a 7-member body appointed, 4 of them as mayoral appointees and 3 from the Board of Supervisors, because we're city county. And they each represented folks with stakes, right? A stakeholder in the issuance of a place of entertainment. So there was 2 people who represented the residents of San Francisco. There was 2 people who represented the nightlife venues, so the industry. There was someone with a urban planning background, someone with a public safety or police background, and someone with a public health background. And those folks were set up to have conversations in a public way, right, on a regular basis, and to argue with each other, really, as stakeholders, and determine whether an application that came through our office, so we staffed this commission, was something that they were going to give a nod to under a certain set of conditions. So it's somewhat similar to maybe a conditional use process with a planning department. However, they're not looking at whether this is like meeting a planning document. They're looking at the operational capacity of the venue owner, and they're looking at the operation and determining whether there's enough there to feel comfortable with the city giving, their permission. That's really what a permit is, to begin to operate this nightlife venue, which has potential negative impacts as well as positive impacts. So that process was sort of developed over time, and it had, hiccups, and there were some serious arguing that would go on between a neighborhood representative, right? Is this the right thing for this place? And it was interesting, and it was a fun learning environment. And then as we sort of smoothed out how that process worked, right, we were able to then come up above sort of the basic pressure of how to do that as things come and go, helping the applicants along the way to sit down with their application and sort of prep them for what does it mean to really run a venue, and get a sense of how much they knew. Lots of folks come into this space because they've been to bars and nightclubs. And so because they've been patrons, they think they can run one. And that's not always the case. Clearly, it takes some business acumen, and it takes some management skills, and it takes a lot of work to work under a pretty heavily regulated environment, which is nightclubs. So it's not only regulated by the state in terms of alcohol, but also right by the city and many agencies that get their fingers into what you do every day, whether it's your trash, that comes out, or the health department, and determining whether you're serving, healthy drinks and food, if that's your deal, and noise, and all the things that we talk about at RHI. So I think that the most important impacts the Entertainment Commission has had and will continue to have, obviously after COVID releases us, is that we did in fact facilitate entertainment permitting, whereas before, and folks who don't have an entity that's focused on this nightlife as it is, don't have anybody working for that industry or sector. So we did in fact do the facilitation. We acted as a liaison. We moved walls when people hit bureaucratic snags, which they always do, again, in a heavily regulated environment. We did an annual update for all of our folks who were operating in that space in terms of an annual summit to bring them up to date on what the state requirements are and what the city requirements are every year, because they change, because it's a fluid industry that's constantly reinventing itself. So we always had to keep people up to date. We tried to network them together, because one thing that they don't do often is know each other and meet, because they're always really busy with their own business, and they stay up late into the night and they get up and do it all over again. So we were also, I think, able to engage with operators, both positive and negative, because while we were there to help, when somebody did something they weren't supposed to do, I took that really seriously. And it was really important that if there's violence in a venue, if somebody, ended up with police in their venue for whatever reason, it was really important to take them to task and quickly, and then figure out where in the operation something went wrong and how they could improve. And then if they weren't engaging in that process, had the power to take that permit away. And then in addition, and you attended, we did an annual Nighty Awards. We did an attempt to give the folks who did operate well a reward by giving out awards for the best nightlife operators in a whole bunch of categories. And that went on for 5 years and was super fun, because mostly government just leaves you alone if you do the right thing. And we didn't think that was the bar. We thought we needed to go higher. So we had our Nightlife Awards, and we had 23 categories, and we had a super fun Monday night awards show that was, I like to call, if the Grammys and the Porn Awards had a baby, that was what the Nighty Awards were.
Moving forward, how would you say that a city might learn the lessons and start from a new place without having to go through a lot of what you struggled with? And particularly moving forward following COVID, now that we could see the reopening, but there'll be many streets, particularly in cities like San Francisco, that is dependent upon tourism and conventions, and that whole sector, that may not come back again until late 2021 or even early 2022. And so many of those districts that depended upon that clientele are going to maybe not even make it.
I think that we're going to see a shift in physicality, and hopefully cities, in terms of their zoning, will allow that shift to happen. There's a part of this work, right, and any government work, that is, you want to be proactive and you want to do some things in advance of what you think might happen, but there's value in waiting for the natural occurrence of things to take place before then trying to wrap your arms around it and sort of like manage it. So in terms of the economic development piece, I think we're going to see pretty quickly the people who are less risk averse, right, to get out there. I think there is a sense around a Roaring 20s kind of return to what we loved very much. And I do think that this pandemic, for all its negatives, we've talked about the positive side of making people aware that sociability has so much value, and being together physically has so much value. And so in that regard, I think people see the value and don't take for granted anymore many times the nightlife and available ways that they could socialize. They are very appreciative, which I think the owners of these venues will see for a time. And then ultimately it's just up to government again to sort of try to not fit like square pegs in round holes. As that industry is so malleable and changing, you as government have to sort of be nimble about how you regulate it. As far as, like, again, the movement of where people can go out, if it's not downtowns because they're not going to offices anymore, then those venues will end up somewhere. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you where they'll go, but I think that it's important that government be flexible, especially in terms of zoning. Because many times, right, you want to open a venue somewhere, but the city says you can't because entertainment has been zoned in certain allowable areas. And this will come up when we talk about cannabis as well. There's a notion, right, that entertainment has these impacts and therefore it needs to be put in the right place. And so now that COVID did a full stop for the first time, obviously in our lifetimes and in many lifetimes, of sociability, when it comes back based on the context of other things that are going on, we don't know where it's going to be. So it may be a whole opportunity to rezone your city for appropriate types of socialization. And then, I think the core of what the Entertainment Commission does is going to go back to what it was doing, which was to help people operate as well as possible under a set of conditions that make sense for the location and the operation that they're in.
So the Entertainment Commission, the way it's structured, could actually be an important resource for any kind of rezoning and planning, because you'll have so many different diverse perspectives sitting around the table. And as you're beginning to go beyond just the licensing of individual venues, the Entertainment Commission may actually play a bigger role in identifying areas in the city that may be more suitable for socialization, and not necessarily try to bring back those areas that might have been problematic because of over concentration or too much density of socializing, or because the surrounding environment might change. But I think you also raised an important point, and that is we have to see how so much the dust will settle. And while today you have this, oh, it's been great working at home and businesses are saving money by not having commercial space. Even Minneapolis, Target is giving up over 900,000 square feet of office space. The question will be, will people actually want to continue that way? And will we be going backwards and saying, oh, we got to go back to offices again because that's the way people want to work? We may not know long term, but short term, we're going to have to be flexible, like you're saying, to witness that. You brought up the fact that cannabis may also fit into this whole realm of having a coordinated oversight body, relative to, introducing cannabis, and particularly how people use cannabis in these social spaces. Do you see that maybe cannabis may be not kind of a stepchild to the drugs that we could use in a particular social venue where we can have caffeine and alcohol, but that it could actually become a part of it? And how would that be regulated?
Yeah, so the word you used, which is the most important, is that it's still considered a drug by the federal government. And in some cases, medical cannabis is thought of as, right, a drug, something that helps folks with certain conditions get better or alleviate symptoms. But in large part, the acceptance of cannabis as a wellness product and as a recreational product needs to happen once the federal government takes it off the Schedule 1, right, list of illegal drugs, and it's not thought of or talked about as a drug. People don't talk about alcohol as a drug unless you're in the recovery community, and people don't talk about cigarettes and nicotine as a drug, but they are highly regulated because they have impacts, right? But also are celebrated and used by adults per the law for the purpose, right, of recreating. So I think we'll get there. We need to wait for federal nods, right? And then we need to have localities in California in particular, because we have a two-tiered system where the state issues permits or licenses, and so does the locality. And so they'll determine in each locality what seems appropriate for their community. And here where I live in Southern California, there's an allowance in certain cities for lounges, cannabis lounges, so people can socialize using cannabis. But like you said, they can't bring other uh, recreational products like alcohol or cigarettes or even food for that matter right now into that scenario. So the laws and the regulations are changing all the time, and we're working on, you gotta know where you're going before you know you're gonna get there, right? So we want what you're saying, but we are a few steps away from engaging with cannabis as, right, sitting equal and not being a stepchild, well, not being a drug.
So one final point, if we're together and have this call 18 months from now, which will be the fall of 2022, just as briefly as you can say, like a sound bite, what do you think how will people socialize differently? Will home entertainment replace public entertainment or become a bigger part of it? Will music streaming be another way for musicians to perform without necessarily having to do the road shows? I mean, how do you see the future of music and socializing and entertainment being different in 2022?
Well, I think we'll be back to opportunities for in person, in real life, IRL, being with each other. There's nothing that can replace being at a live music event, in my opinion. I do think we will see some of the other opportunities happening at the same time. There'll be a mixture of options for people. I think because there are great platforms for streaming music and live shows, those aren't going to go anywhere. And they may, in fact, bring more people into the notion that live music events are things that we can do even if we're homebound for whatever reason, and engaged at the same time as people who are there in real life. However, I think we'll be back. I know nightclubs will be back. Outdoor dining, we've talked a little bit about. I think large events will be back. Coachella is planning on coming back, and I think we'll all be together really soon.
Well, this has been great, Jocelyn. You provide a lot of useful information. You obviously have a wealth of knowledge and experience and bring some insights, I think, that many cities could benefit from. But I want to thank you for taking your time today and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Okay.